Since the dawn of time, humans have found themselves before a reality that appears solid, visible, and unchanging. But behind this apparent stability, there are hidden layers, subtle veils that conceal profound truths, accessible only to those who dare to go beyond the obvious. The first encounter with this idea often causes bewilderment, even discomfort, as it suggests that everything we consider real may merely be a convenient construct, a setting carefully maintained by forces that cannot be seen with the naked eye. The prophecy of the three veils is born as an ancient whisper, repeated by wise men, occultists, and mystics throughout the centuries. It is not just any allegory, but an encoded map for the liberation of the human spirit from the prison of ignorance. For millennia, spiritual masters from different traditions have symbolically described these veils as layers that obscure the true essence of being. The first veil is associated with sensory illusion, the second with mental conditioning, and the third with the forgetting of the eternal self. The problem lies not in the existence of the veils, but in the complete ignorance of their presence. Most live an entire existence without ever suspecting that there is something behind what their eyes see. We grow up immersed in inherited belief systems, nourished by a culture that rewards conformity and punishes curiosity. By accepting everything as it is, without questioning, we become voluntary prisoners, keeping closed the doors that could lead us to revelation. Those who awaken to the reality of the veils experience a rupture. A sort of internal collapse sets in, where everything that seemed certain begins to appear artificial. This deconstruction, although painful, is the seed of true wisdom. It is at this point that the seeker finds himself faced with a choice: to continue on the comfortable path of illusion or to tread the arduous path of discovery. The prophecy speaks of a few who have managed to surpass the three veils, men and women who transcended the mental, emotional, and spiritual prison of the ordinary world. These people are not worshipped in temples, nor celebrated on magazine covers, for their brilliance challenges the foundations of everything that the system defends. The first veil is upheld by unceasing distractions: news, entertainment, manufactured desires, compulsive routines, all carefully architected to avoid silence, emptiness, and self-encounter. Distraction is the first trap. The second veil is strengthened by fear and misinformation. Fear of breaking the mold, fear of thinking differently, fear of being excluded. The third veil is the most subtle. It's the illusory identity, the ego that is confused with the real self. It is the one who resists liberation, as it fears its own dissolution. To transcend these veils requires rare courage. The prophecy does not promise comfort nor glory. It only points the way to truth, which is always straightforward, but never easy. The consciousness that begins to glimpse these veils feels as if it is coming out of a trance. It is a process of deprogramming, of profound deconditioning. Many retreat when they feel the impact of the truth. It is easier to remain in the known darkness than to face the light that reveals everything. But for the few who persist, an irreversible transformation begins. The world can no longer be seen in the same way. Words, symbols, everyday behaviors take on new layers of meaning. One begins to see the theater behind the stage, the script behind the speech, the manipulation behind the discourse. The origin of this prophecy dates back to ancient records. There are references in the Vedic writings, in the Pythagorean schools, in the Gnostic traditions, and even in the teachings of Christ and Buddha. In all these paths, there is a common warning. There is more than meets the eye. It is this awakened consciousness that breaks with the mechanical view of the universe. What was taken for granted, time, space, the self, starts to be seen as transient elements of a much broader experience. This initial rupture is like a symbolic death. A part of us needs to die for another to be born, and this is exactly what the prophecy announces: the rebirth of the original being before the veils. Many seek outward signs of awakening: synchronicities, mystical experiences, unexpected encounters. But the true sign is in the subtle shift of perception. You begin to notice the world's repetitions, the hidden patterns in events, the emptiness in words spoken out of habit. You don't react as before, you start to observe. And in that space between stimulus and reaction, freedom is born. It's the beginning of the journey. The veils are not removed all at once. They gradually dissolve, layer by layer, as the seeker becomes receptive to truth and resistant to manipulation. This sensitivity, however, is accompanied by loneliness. What one sees after the first tear in the fabric of reality cannot be easily shared. Human language does not accommodate the truths of the spirit, and therefore the awakened are often seen as strange, eccentric, or even dangerous. But the real danger lies in ignorance, not in knowledge. Those who see beyond the veils become lights amid the fog, even if they do not wish to. Their mere presence is unsettling, as it reveals the darkness that others refuse to see. The enlightened, without uttering a word, expose the system. The prophecy is not a guaranteed destiny, it's a possibility. And like every possibility, it demands effort, commitment, and discipline to materialize. It's not enough to desire to see. One must have trained eyes. It's not enough to want to know. One must unlearn. The process of ascension begins with the collapse of all certainties. It's like tearing the veil of a theater and discovering that the stage was an illusion upheld by fragile beliefs. Only then can we start to investigate who we really are and why we are here. The first step is not outward, it's inward. It's not possible to wake someone who pretends to sleep, and that's exactly the state of a large part of humanity. Settled in the comfortable fantasy of consumption, ego, and distraction, it rejects any glimmer of lucidity that threatens to burst its bubble. Therefore, those who carry the light of consciousness need to walk with humility and firmness. They are not here to convince, but to live the truth. And by living it, they become a silent invitation for others to awaken. This is the invisible mission of those who cross the veils, to keep the flame of remembrance of who we are alight, even when everything around seems to forget it. As we delve deeper into understanding the three veils, we realize that it's not just a mystical metaphor, but a real, psychological, and energetic model of human functioning. They are internal barriers, but supported by external forces. They are not just concepts, they are lived experiences. Those who have felt the world crumble upon realizing an uncomfortable truth know the first veil. Those who identified the system of lies that sustains institutions know the second. And those who have confronted the emptiness of their own ego and embraced it have touched the third. What's at stake is not just individual awakening, but collective awakening. Each being that tears a veil contributes to weakening the web of illusion that dominates humanity. The prophecy is not about an external savior, it's about the rise of consciousness. Each person who remembers their divine origin and assumes their internal responsibility helps to break the shackles of collective forgetfulness. For this reason, the call is urgent and the time is now. For every moment spent asleep is an instant more surrendered to manipulation. And every second awake is a spark of eternity released into the world. The first veil is perhaps the most treacherous of all, precisely because of its deceptive simplicity. It hides in broad daylight, in the vibrant colors of billboards, in the allure of shop windows, and in the logic of the news. Everything seems so tangible, so evident, so unquestionable. What the eyes see, the brain validates. What the media repeats, the subconscious absorbs. This is where the imprisonment begins, in the belief that the visible world is the real world. But what few understand is that this tangible reality is just a superficial layer of a much broader existence. The first veil is that of form, of appearances, narratives, social roles, and it keeps us too busy to look at the invisible that pulsates behind the material. From an early age, we are trained to identify with what is outside, the toy we desire, the clothes we wear, the profession we choose. Everything becomes a mirror of what we believe ourselves to be. We are not educated to look within, but to react to the exterior. This conditioning is so efficient that even when something inside us begins to scream for meaning, we are taught to ignore, to silence, to suppress. The first veil is reinforced by routine. Wake up, work, consume, repeat. And the busier we are, the less room there is for questioning. We live as characters in a play that was already running long before we were born, following a script we never wrote. The illusion of the visible world leads us to believe that matter is the pinnacle of existence. The body is treated as identity, money as a measure of value, success as purpose. Everything revolves around the tangible, the verifiable, the measurable. But what happens when the body falls ill, when money is scarce, when success loses its shine? The fragility of this structure begins to show. And at this moment, something profound begins to stir within the individual, a suspicion that there is something beyond. This mistrust is dangerous for the system, as it is the first step towards awakening. It's the crack in the veil. The first veil is kept alive by a superficial language. Words lose their power when they are repeated without awareness. Love turns into a slogan. Freedom becomes a product. Spirituality turns into marketing. The essence gets diluted and the content is replaced by image. The visible world, when not questioned, becomes a distorted mirror of reality. It only shows what the system wants us to see. Meanwhile, the invisible, intuition, inner truth, the soul's call, remains ignored, like a whisper drowned out by the constant noise of distraction. The ancients knew that this veil would be the hardest to perceive. They didn't have cell phones, social media, or mass advertising, but they already warned about the danger of identifying with the sensory world. In Egypt, the concept of Maya, inherited from the Vedic traditions, already denounced this illusion. The Greeks spoke of Plato's cave, where shadows projected on a wall were taken as reality. In all serious traditions, there is a call to awaken perception, and this awakening begins precisely with doubt. Is everything I see real, or is it just a representation? The strength of the first veil lies in consensus. When everyone believes in the same illusion, it becomes real. When everyone follows the same patterns, questioning seems like madness. Normality is built as a shield against the unusual. Those who think differently are marginalized. Those who see beyond are labeled. But those who dare to break this consensus initiate a process of deconditioning. They start to question why things are as they are. Why do we work so much? Why do we accept so much suffering? Why do we seek approval all the time? Each question is a crack in the veil. Breaking the first veil is not an act of denying matter, but of disidentification. It's not about rejecting the visible world, but realizing that it is not all there is. It's an internal shift that completely changes the way of living. The body continues, objects persist, everyday life goes on, but the soul of the observer changes. They are no longer bound to forms, but attentive to what exists beyond them. They see the world with new eyes, eyes that perceive symbols, patterns, subtle repetitions that previously went unnoticed. Life begins to gain depth. At the moment when the first veil begins to unravel, often the person experiences a kind of existential collapse. Nothing seems to make sense anymore. The career loses its luster, relationships seem superficial, the goals once desired now sound empty. This crisis is a blessing in disguise. It's the necessary breaking point for the birth of a new vision. The soul, suffocated by years of silence, begins to emerge, and with it comes an insatiable thirst for meaning, for authenticity, for truth. The visible world no longer satisfies. But this journey is not painless. Breaking the first veil is like leaving a dark room where everyone sleeps and walking alone towards the light. The eyes hurt. The heart hesitates. Fear arises. The old world calls back with promises of comfort, stability, and acceptance. Many give in and return, but those who persist gain access to a deeper, subtler, truer world. They realize that the visible is merely a symbol of the invisible, that each event carries a lesson, that each pain brings a revelation. Those who overcome the first veil become observers of the game. They no longer react as they used to. They perceive the manipulation in the news, the hypnosis on social media, the seduction in easy promises. They see the system as a cogwheel that spins to keep everyone asleep. But instead of fighting against it directly, they choose to live outside of it. Their freedom is internal. Their consciousness is no longer tied to form. They begin to live from the inside out, guided by a compass that does not depend on the outside world. This new way of living is quiet yet revolutionary. It doesn't need speeches or confrontations. It expresses itself in presence, in peace, in clarity. Those who live beyond the first veil project an energy that arouses curiosity, discomfort, and inspiration in others. Not because they want to convince, but simply by being. Their presence unveils what is hidden. Their authenticity disarms others' masks. They become a living reminder that there is something beyond, and that something is what we truly are. Upon surpassing the first veil, the seeker is merely at the beginning of the journey. But this beginning is sacred, for it marks the end of unconscious slavery. Now he knows that there is something more, and this awareness, once awakened, can never be forgotten. From here, the search intensifies. The second veil approaches, more subtle, more ingenious, more challenging. But the one who has seen beyond form already possesses a precious key, the knowledge that reality is not what we were told. And with this key, he can begin to open doors that previously seemed locked forever. If the first veil keeps us bound to the illusion of the visible world, the second is even more sophisticated and silent. It does not manipulate with images but with ideas. It is the veil of mental conditioning, of implanted beliefs, of fabricated truths, and meticulously constructed narratives to shape collective thought. Here, control is not exerted with physical chains, but with invisible structures that define what is possible to think, say, and desire. This veil is a subtle field, programmed to appear natural. It does not impose, it convinces. And most alarmingly, it is upheld by the victims themselves, who defend it fervently, without realizing they live within a prison whose bars are made of ideas. The second veil begins to be woven in the early years of life. We are introduced to an educational system that does not teach us to think, but to repeat. We learn formulas, dates, rules, but we are not invited to question, reflect, or create. The school, instead of liberating, often molds the mind to obey. Political, economic, and religious systems also contribute to the construction of this veil. Each one offers a version of the truth, each one adapted to what is most convenient for the maintenance of the existing order. Doubt is discouraged, skepticism is punished, and conformity is rewarded with apparent stability and false security. It is within this veil that the invisible institutions reside. They are not buildings or explicit organizations, but symbolic structures that control the perception of reality. Dogma, morality, spiritless science, spirituality without practice, politics without ethics. All these layers form a containment field for consciousness. They tell us what is right or wrong, possible or impossible, real or fantastical. When someone dares to question these structures, they immediately suffer a symbolic attack. They are labeled as a heretic, madman, rebel, extremist, or conspirator. Language is used as a weapon to protect the veil. The second veil is upheld by narratives incessantly repeated. Phrases such as, "It's always been this way," "It's all in your head," "There's no way to change," "It's just a coincidence," are mental programs inserted into us throughout life. They act as psychic antiviruses that hinder the advancement of consciousness. Each time something escapes the system's logic, these programs kick in to neutralize the expansion. Regardless of the evidence, direct experience, or deep feeling, if it contradicts the code of the second veil, it's discarded as delusion. This explains why many backtrack when they begin to awaken. The second veil defends itself with much more vigor than the first. Breaking this veil requires more than courage. It requires integrity. For awakening begins to affect relationships, choices, career, lifestyle. It's impossible to continue living in the same way once you see the level of manipulation the world is immersed in. And here, loneliness deepens. Friends drift away, family criticizes, colleagues mock. But the seeker can no longer pretend. He has seen too much. He realizes that television does not inform, it shapes, that science doesn't explain everything, it limits, that religion doesn't liberate, it imprisons, that leaders do not guide, they manipulate. The solid ground of the old reality begins to crumble. Within the second veil, we find a meticulous architecture of mind control. Techniques of propaganda, social engineering, ideological indoctrination, and inverted narratives shape the mind of the global population. Reality is edited, the past is rewritten, the future is predetermined by algorithms, and all this is done so sophisticatedly that few even realize they are being led. Technology, instead of being a bridge to awakening, becomes a golden shackle. The seeker begins to see how entertainment was designed to numb, how social media feeds vanity, how information is filtered to strengthen the dominant paradigm. At the core of the second veil lies fear. Fear of losing one's identity, fear of not belonging, fear of being rejected. This fear fuels conformity and upholds limiting beliefs. It is what prevents true questioning. Therefore, the path to transcend the second veil necessarily involves confronting internal fear. Not the fear of the system, but the fear of breaking away from it. It's a silent mourning that occurs within the seeker. They need to die to everything they believe to be true, to be reborn with new eyes, a new mind, a new spirit. It's a painful process, but absolutely necessary. The great thinkers of history have tried to warn us about this veil. George Orwell in 1984 demonstrated how language can be distorted to control the mind. Aldous Huxley in Brave New World revealed how superficial pleasure can become a tool of domination. Socrates was condemned for teaching the youth to think. Jesus was persecuted for exposing the hypocrisy of religious structures. Buddha broke with the dogmas of his time to discover the truth within himself. All of these beings touched the second veil and tried to cross it, and for this, they were fought, rejected, or silenced. The consciousness that begins to break through the second veil acquires an almost painful clarity. It sees how the masses are led like flocks, how conflicts are manufactured, how division is fueled to prevent unity. The seeker understands that the world is not disorganized. It is orderly manipulated. Nothing happens by chance. Every crisis, every trend, every cultural movement carries an invisible agenda. And this doesn't make him paranoid, but a lucid observer. He no longer allows himself to be carried away by ready-made narratives. He investigates. He listens to the silence behind the noise. Upon crossing the second veil, the seeker gains a subtle power, discernment. They no longer believe in everything, but they also do not deny everything. They feel, they observe the fruits, they test with their own life, they become sovereign of their mind. They no longer lend their thoughts to external systems. They begin to create a new inner reality where intuition is worth more than propaganda and silence is worth more than opinion. And this new mental field is reflected in new choices, new connections, new life direction. But the second veil does not dissolve forever. It tries to return. It seduces with ancient pleasures, with old routines, with the appeal of normality. Therefore, vigilance is necessary. The seeker who reaches this point needs to strengthen their mind, purify their language, refine their company. They must care for the terrain of their consciousness like a gardener who tends to a rare plant, because everything around will conspire for them to return to the comfort of unconsciousness. And this is where the curious is separated from the committed. Only those who accept to pay the price of lucidity can sustain the freedom that is born beyond the second veil. Whoever breaks this veil begins to influence the collective field. Their presence interferes with the surrounding unconscious. They become an agent of deprogramming, not with words, but with vibration. Their way of living is a silent example that it is possible to think outside the box, feel beyond the script, live outside the model, and gradually others begin to question as well. Thus the chain awakening is born, a field of expansion that spreads slowly among those who are ready. And the more people awaken, the more fragile the veil becomes. The crossing of the second veil is a liberation of the mind, and with it, the urge to know something even deeper is born. Because even with a free mind, there remains one obstacle: identification with the ego. The belief that we are this character we've created for survival. The third veil is the most subtle, deepest, most resistant. It cannot be destroyed with arguments, nor overcome with techniques. It only dissolves with total surrender to the unknown. That's where we're heading now, towards the deepest core of being. The third veil is the thickest, most subtle, and paradoxically, the most intimate. It is not outside, nor is it in thought. It is in the heart of the constructed self. It is the veil of the ego, of the character we believe ourselves to be, of the identity shaped over a lifetime of experiences, fears, traumas, and desires. This veil is not upheld by governments, schools, or religions, but by ourselves. It is the most finely crafted disguise of illusion as it merges with our own voice, with our feelings, with what we call who I am. And that's why it's the hardest to break, because it requires us to renounce what we hold most dear, our image of ourselves. This veil gradually forms, starting from childhood, when we learn that being loved depends on being a certain way. When we discover that we cannot be everything we feel, we begin to adapt. We create versions of ourselves that are accepted, desired, valued. And over time, we forget who we were before these versions. The ego is born from this disconnection. It is a clever, versatile mask, capable of surviving in any environment. But while it protects us, it also separates us. It separates us from ourselves, from others, and from deep reality. It's the onion peel that seems to protect us from the world, but also isolates us from our essential core. The third veil is built with memories, with stories we tell ourselves to justify who we are. I am this way because I suffered that. I can't because I never had that. I am strong because I survived this. These narratives seem true, but they are just interpretations. They are ties that support the character. And the most dangerous, this veil is afraid of disappearing. Because disappearing means giving up control, and the ego survives on control. It fears the unknown, the silence, the surrender. It prefers known pain to unknown freedom. To break the third veil is to face the void. It is to look within and realize that, behind all layers of identity, there is no clear definition of I. We are not our thoughts, nor our feelings, nor our memories. We are not the roles we play, nor the pains we carry. We are something prior to all of this. But this something cannot be explained. It can only be lived. And this living requires silence, presence, vulnerability. It requires abandoning the need to understand everything, to name everything, to control everything. It requires total surrender to the direct experience of being. The ancient mystics knew that the ego was the greatest obstacle to enlightenment. In Sufism, for example, there is the concept of nafs, the layers of the ego that must be purified until only the divine essence remains. In mystical Christianity, the death of the self is spoken of as a prerequisite for the birth of the inner Christ. In Buddhism, the idea of anatta, the absence of a permanent self, is central to liberation. In all these traditions, the teaching is clear. As long as the conditioned self is in control, the truth cannot emerge. Because the truth does not fit into concepts. It only reveals itself in the profound silence of the absence of the self. The third veil unveils itself when everything around us begins to lose meaning and we realize that it's not the world that's wrong, it's our perception. We start to question even our desires. Why do I want what I want? Who wants this within me? Is this dream truly mine? Or is it an unconscious repetition of a social, familial, ancestral desire? The questioning deepens, and with it, the collapse of the old self intensifies. It's no longer an existential crisis. It's an identity crisis. The seeker realizes they no longer know who they are, and at the same time, feels they have never been so close to the truth. It is at this point that the crossing requires absolute courage, because what comes next cannot be planned. The ego wants to know where it is going. It wants security. It wants guarantees. But the path of the soul does not offer maps. It offers surrender. It is a leap into the unknown that can only be taken with faith, with surrender, with humility. And this is where many give up. Because the price of freedom is the symbolic death of the constructed self. And this death hurts. It hurts because it's a birth, and every birth involves pain, blood, rupture. But it is in this suffering that something new is born, pure consciousness, the essential self, the nameless I. The dissolution of the third veil is not a single event, but a process. It happens in waves, in cycles, in spirals. Sometimes we believe we have overcome it, but it returns in a new form. This is because the ego is a master at disguising itself. It can even dress up as spirituality, humility, enlightenment. It can use the right words, the right gestures, the right practices, all to keep itself alive. Therefore, the real test lies in the depth of inner silence. Only when there is no longer a need to be something, to appear as something, to prove something, only then does the veil truly begin to unravel. Silence is the key, but not external silence, the silence of presence, that inner space where nothing needs to happen, where there is no expectation, no comparison, no desire for an outcome, where the being simply is. In this state, the ego loses power, because it doesn't know what to do with the now. It lives from the past and the future. It feeds on stories. But in the now, in the pure instant of consciousness, it dissolves. And that's where the seeker finds what no book can teach, the direct experience of the essence, not as a concept, but as a living reality. What remains after the third veil is an inexplicable peace. Not the peace that depends on circumstances, but the peace that is the very foundation of being. There's no longer a need to be right, to win, to impress. There's just presence, clarity, compassion. The seeker becomes a channel of consciousness. He acts, but doesn't react. He speaks, but doesn't impose. He lives, but doesn't cling. He becomes light, free, whole. Not because he achieved a goal, but because he abandoned all. He no longer needs to be something. He is everything, and at the same time, nothing. He recognizes the unity behind diversity, and this recognition changes everything. This inner freedom cannot be given by anyone. It cannot be taught nor bought. It can only be discovered within oneself, and once found, it is never lost again, because it does not depend on external conditions. It is not a passing emotion, nor an altered state of consciousness. It is the very nature of consciousness. And that is why the prophecy of the three veils is so powerful, because it does not point outward, it points inward. It does not offer answers, it dismantles questions. It does not propose beliefs, it dissolves illusions. It returns us to the origin. Breaking the third veil is the true rebirth. Not an emotional rebirth, nor psychological, but spiritual. It is the birth of the self without form, without name, without history. A self that observes everything, welcomes everything, loves everything. A self that does not confuse itself with the body, with the mind, with the past. A self that is pure being. This realization is not grandiose nor dramatic. It is silent, simple, almost imperceptible, but at the same time, it is the most powerful thing that can happen to a human being, because from it, everything changes, and there are no more veils, only clarity. Breaking through the three veils is not a glorious end. It's the beginning of a solitary, profound, and radical journey. The one who crosses these layers of illusion does not find immediate recognition, applause, or understanding. On the contrary, the world that once surrounded him with familiarity now seems distant, cold, and even hostile. The people who used to be around him no longer resonate at the same frequency. Common interests become void, and the sparkle that was once in conventional goals fades away. The awakened one, then, begins to face a paradox. He is freer than ever, but also more alone. And this loneliness is the first trial by fire on the true path. It is at this point that the pain intensifies. It's no longer about suffering caused by external factors, but the silent pain of vibrational separation. The awakened one feels that they've lost their footing, but have yet to find another. They are in between worlds. They no longer belong to the old paradigm, but have not yet been fully embraced by the new. This crossing between two states of consciousness requires inner strength, as everything around invites surrender. The old world offers comfort and acceptance, If they just pretend that nothing has changed, they can return to being normal. But something within them no longer allows this return. The seed of awakening has sprouted, and there's no reversing the growth. At this stage, pain manifests in subtle and profound ways. The feeling of uselessness arises in the face of structures that once made sense. Career, status, social recognition, all of this loses its appeal. The meaning of life is no longer tied to external achievements, but to an internal alignment. The problem is that this alignment is still under construction. The awakened one finds themselves in a fertile void, where everything has been undone, but nothing has yet been rebuilt. It's like being amidst ruins, knowing that something new will be born there, but still not knowing what. The temptation to return is strong. The old ego, even wounded, tries to resurface with refined masks. It proposes new goals, disguised as spirituality, new characters, more sophisticated, to take the place of the old. This is one of the most common traps on the path to awakening, replacing old illusions with new ones, more beautiful but equally false. The real progress only happens when there is constant vigilance and humility to recognize that the ego is a master in the art of disguise. Integrity at this moment is the safest compass. Not to follow what shines, but what resonates. Not to chase what enchants, but what silences. Amidst this existential desert, something begins to reveal itself. Clarity deepens, the gaze becomes more penetrating. The mind quiets with greater ease, the heart starts to pulse with a silent wisdom. The awakened one begins to notice synchronicities that previously went unnoticed, subtle signs that the universe sends in the form of encounters, words, symbols, dreams. He starts to live in a state of listening. Every gesture of life carries a message. Every silence becomes eloquent. He no longer needs explanations, he feels. He no longer seeks answers, he understands. This new state of consciousness brings with it a crucial revelation. Awakening is not an event, but a continuous process. There is no finish line. With each layer that unravels, another presents itself. With each certainty achieved, a new question emerges. The awakened understands that the path is eternal, and that the goal is not to arrive somewhere, but to be fully present at each step. Truth ceases to be something to be conquered and becomes a vibration to be maintained. They realize that life, in its essence, is an infinite school of consciousness, and that each situation, no matter how mundane it may seem, carries a sacred teaching. Over time, the awakened one begins to encounter others who are also on their journey. At first glance, they seem ordinary. They don't use labels, nor titles, nor make a fuss. But there's something in their gaze, in their presence, that betrays the depth of their journey. And the encounter between the awakened ones is silent and powerful. There's no need to say much. A gesture, a word, a shared silence is enough to recognize the presence of a fellow traveler. This connection offers comfort and strength, not by filling a void, but by reminding that the journey, although solitary, is not solitary forever. The challenges continue. The pain does not disappear, but changes its form. It ceases to be distress and becomes refinement. Each difficulty becomes a mirror, each discomfort an invitation to growth. The awakened one learns to embrace the shadows with more tenderness, to deal with chaos with more serenity. They no longer seek to avoid suffering, but to understand it. They know that pain is a gateway, and for that reason, they do not reject it. They pass through it, and on the other side, they find layers of themselves that were dormant, waiting to be remembered. The greatest revelation of this journey is that awakening does not make us better nor superior, but more human, more humble, more compassionate, more present. Awakening does not seek to convert anyone nor prove anything. It simply lives its truth. And this experience in itself transforms, not because it imposes, but because it inspires. Its subtle example touches those who are ready. Its silent presence acts as a healing field. It does not need to speak. It is enough to be. And this being becomes its main offering to the world. The pain of the journey is offset by a joy that does not depend on circumstances. a joy that springs from the simple fact of being aware, of noticing the beauty in details, of feeling gratitude for the unseen, of recognizing perfection even in apparent chaos. This joy is not euphoric nor fleeting, it is serene, deep, constant. It settles as the backdrop of existence, and even amidst the pains and losses of life, it remains. It is the peace of knowing that one is aligned with something greater, even without understanding everything. Finally, the awakened one understands that his mission is not to save the world, but to be a beacon, not to illuminate everyone, but to keep his own flame lit, even when the winds are against him. He understands that the true revolution is silent, it begins within and spreads through resonance. He does not fight against the old, nor clings to the new. He walks lightly, knowing that everything is part of the process. He honors the illusion, but lives the truth. And thus, his life becomes a silent testimony to the possibility of living beyond the veils. Throughout history, enigmatic figures have emerged to reveal what the veils attempt to hide. These masters, often misunderstood, walked ahead of their time, unveiling truths that the world was not yet ready to accept. They did not fit in, they did not submit, they did not seek applause. Their presence was a quiet disruption in the matrix of normality. They did not come to create religions, but to break down mental walls. They were called mad, heretics, dangerous. Some were silenced with violence, others erased by official history, and few, only a few, were truly heard. But all left a trace, a sign, a spark of something that resonates to this day in the hearts of those who dare to see beyond. Buddha, for example, when he abandoned all titles and riches of his world, was not seeking renunciation out of contempt, but for liberation. When he sat under the tree and faced emptiness, he did not discover an external God, but the end of the illusion of himself. And his silence after enlightenment spoke more than 1,000 books. Jesus, when confronting the powerful of his time, was not bringing a religion, but the reminder of a forgotten truth: the kingdom is within. His words about love and forgiveness were not moral gestures, but keys to liberation for those who knew how to read them with their soul. Socrates, by provoking the young to think for themselves, sealed his death sentence by breaking with the intellectual conformity of his society. All, in distinct ways, were piercing through the three veils. Prophecies in all cultures have always announced a transition, a rupture between the time of sleep and the time of wakefulness. They did not point to cataclysmic destructions in the literal sense, but to the collapse of control structures, of paradigms based on fear, of the domination of consciousness. The fall of empires has always been linked to the rise of consciousness, and the signs of this new era have always come disguised as chaos. The crises, ecological collapses, political conflicts, and the acceleration of time are not signs of the end. They are the death throes of an old world that resists dying. In the Mayan texts, there is a vision of cycles of humanity, and the end of the long calendar did not mean the end of the world, but the end of a cycle of blindness. For the Andean people, the prophecy of the return of the children of the sun spoke of the resurgence of those who would live according to natural wisdom, free from the manipulations of the conditioned mind. In the East, the Vedas spoke of the Kali Yuga, the age of darkness, where lies would become law and the wise would be persecuted. But they also predicted a time of dawn, when hidden knowledge would return to those who were ready to remember. Even in Judeo-Christian traditions, there is talk of a time when the veils would fall from the eyes, and the last would be the first. These prophecies are not promises, they are mirrors. They do not announce something inevitable, but something possible, something latent, something that depends on the state of consciousness of each individual. The masters always pointed inward. Their words were not maps, they were mirrors. They did not come to save anyone, for they knew that the true Savior is within each one. They only came to rekindle the fire that time and fear nearly extinguished. And they all spoke of signs. Not the spectacular signs of cinematic prophecies, but the subtle signs of inner change, the desire to question, the fatigue of illusion, the call for something more truthful, the thirst for authenticity. Today, the signs are everywhere, but most still do not see them. The acceleration of time, the rise of collective anxiety, the saturation of information, the collapse of certainties. All of this points to an ongoing collective awakening. But the awakening will not come as a miracle. It requires active participation, courage, truth. And that's why the ancient masters are not just historical figures, but living archetypes within us. Each one represents a necessary quality for this new era. The compassion of Jesus, the lucidity of Buddha, the courage of Socrates, the clarity of Lao Tzu, the surrender of Rumi, the integrity of Yeshua, the sacred rebellion of Krishna. The signs of the new era can also be found in children born with innate wisdom, in young people who reject the system without exactly knowing why, in adults who, tired of the hustle and bustle, return to silently gazing at the sky. They are in communities that choose simplicity over status, in people who give up everything to follow their heart, in encounters that seem like coincidences but are actually reunions of awakened souls. Every genuine gesture is a fragment of the new era. Every truth spoken from the heart is a brick in the construction of this new time. Current technologies, although often used for distraction, are also tools for awakening. It has never been easier to access ancient knowledge, listen to forgotten masters, gather spiritual tribes scattered around the world, but discernment is needed, because the same medium that liberates can also imprison. The new age demands a sharp mind, an open heart, and a firm soul. It will not be televised, nor will it be imposed by decrees. It will be born in silence, in the spaces between thoughts, in the breaks of routine, in the eyes that meet in truth. This new era will not come to everyone at the same time. It will start with the few who choose to live differently, those who reject the lie disguised as normality, those who choose consistency over appearance, those willing to lose everything that is false to gain everything that is real. They will be called crazy, naive, dreamers. But they will continue, not out of stubbornness, but because it's impossible to return to the old world. Because once the soul awakens, it no longer settles for what is small, shallow, plastic. It seeks depth. It seeks truth. It seeks itself. The masters have left us codes, sometimes in words, other times in silences, sometimes in symbols, other times in gestures. These codes are scattered, waiting for eyes that know how to see them, for hearts that know how to feel them. They speak of the union between heaven and earth, between reason and intuition, between body and spirit. They announce a time when human beings will stop seeking outside what has always been within. And when this happens, the veils will not fall with a crash, but gently. There will be no spectacle, no explosion, just a profound silence filled with meaning. This part of the journey is a call to recognize the signs, honor the masters, and assume the role that fits us in building the new era. Not as followers of dogmas, but as incarnators of truth. Not as preachers, but as living examples of a new consciousness. Not as saviors, but as servers of the light that each one carries within. Because the time has come, and the veils, even resistant, are already being touched by the invisible hands of awakening. It's up to us to choose, to sustain the illusion, or to fix our gaze in the direction of the truth that has always been with us. After recognizing the veils, crossing their layers, and accepting the calls of ancient masters, the seeker is confronted with a new challenge: the void. Not a common existential void, but a deep space where nothing seems to make sense in the previous way. The old identity has been dissolved, the old desires have lost their strength, and the system that once provided meaning has crumbled. It is here that many feel as if they are adrift, without a map, without direction, without a name. This void, however, is not absence. It is potential. It is the womb of the new consciousness. But only those with enough courage to not run away from it can understand its true transformative power. The void is misunderstood by a mind conditioned to fill all spaces. In the current world, everything is done to avoid silence. The constant noise of the media, the obsession with productivity, the compulsion for stimulation. Everything conspires to prevent the encounter with the void, because the void is dangerous for the ego. In it, there are no images to sustain the persona, There are no goals to justify existence. There are no narratives to uphold meaning. The ego does not know how to exist without reference, and therefore fears this state. But for the spirit, the void is home. It is there that the real being can emerge, free from the layers of imposed identity. Many confuse emptiness with depression, boredom, or loneliness, but what makes it different is its lively nature. It's not the absence of life, but space for the true life to manifest. It's like a sacred pause between two worlds, a gestational silence, a dark night that prepares for the dawn. And like every journey, it requires surrender. The seeker cannot force this process, nor hasten its end. They need to trust, rest in nothingness, accept the suspension of meaning as a legitimate stage of awakening. It is in this rest that new perceptions begin to emerge. The crossing through the void is marked by revelations that don't come through words, but through subtle impressions. Intuition sharpens. The body becomes more sensitive. The mind quiets, allowing deep layers of the unconscious to reveal themselves. The past emerges not as pain, but as a symbol. Wounds gain new light. The seeker realizes that each trauma was a preparation, each loss, a liberation, each mistake, a disguised teacher. And in this silent recognition, he begins to rewrite himself, no longer based on what he lived, but on what is being born. The void also reveals the false urgency of the external world. When the seeker aligns with this state, they realize how everything around operates in haste, desperation, and distraction. They observe with unprecedented clarity how much humanity runs without knowing where to, and this perception places them before a profound choice: to continue spinning in the whirlpool of collective unconsciousness or to anchor themselves in the silent center of being. This choice often needs to be made repeatedly, as external forces will try to pull them back into agitation. But with each return to the center, they strengthen. The true power of emptiness lies in its ability to reveal the essential. In the silence of non-doing, the being learns to listen, not with the ears, but with the soul. It begins to pick up life's messages that previously went unnoticed. The wind brings an ancient memory. A stranger's gaze contains an answer. The sunset reveals a simple and immense truth. Everything begins to speak, not with words, but with presence. And in this state of deep listening, the seeker realizes that everything they were looking for outside was inside, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The void is a stern master, as it requires you to let go of everything. You can't carry certainties to cross it. You can't enter it with an identity, with a name, with goals. You must strip yourself of everything, and this frightens. But it is in this stripping that the soul remembers its true nature. It is not accumulation that reveals who we are. It's detachment. It's not knowledge that enlightens. It's silence. It's not action that transforms. It's being. And when this understanding is no longer theoretical but lived, the void becomes a portal. This is where a new phase of the journey begins, the return to the world, but in a different way. The seeker does not come back as if returning to the old, but as one who brings a new vibration to the old scene. They step on the same ground, but their steps are no longer the same. Their actions now arise from within, not from conditioning. Their speech carries a different weight. Their gaze reveals other truths. They have become a channel for something greater, not by choice but by emptying. The void has made room for what is real to take its place. Presence becomes your main tool. You no longer need to convince anyone. He is, and to be at this level is the greatest teaching. Those who encounter him feel something inexplicable. His energy calms, his silence comforts, his simplicity reveals the sacred. He does not talk about awakening, he embodies awakening. And for this reason, his life becomes a living prayer, meditation in motion, a temple without walls. The world continues with its noises, but he walks in peace, because he no longer depends on the external to maintain his integrity. Crossing the void does not make him passive, but serene. He acts when necessary, speaks when guided, intervenes when he feels. His action does not arise from impulse, but from connection. He has become a bridge between the invisible and the visible, between spirit and matter, between silence and word. And this bridge is alive, dynamic, organic. It does not rely on dogmas, but on direct perception. It does not require effort. It flows. And for this reason, the void is not an end, but a beginning. It is not absence, but origin. It is not a loss, but a return. The seeker who crosses this portal becomes the guardian of the space. He learns to protect his silence, his clarity, his vibration. He knows that everything he has achieved inwardly can be overshadowed, if not honored with discipline and love. Therefore, he becomes more selective with his company, more careful with his language, more conscious of where he places his attention. He does not isolate himself, but also does not blend in unconsciously. He chooses, and each choice strengthens the invisible temple he now carries within him. At the end of this journey, the void reveals itself as the fertile ground where a new consciousness sprouts. The soul, previously asleep under layers of noise, emerges gently, and with it, a new way of living. No longer guided by goals, but by purpose. No longer driven by fear, but by love. No longer seeking answers, but embodying the living question that is existence. The seeker becomes the path. And wherever they go, they carry with them the scent of the eternal. Those who cross the three veils and transmute the inner void achieve a condition that cannot be described as a fixed state, but as a living and vibrant quality of consciousness. Life beyond the veils is not a utopian paradise nor a glorious end, but a continuous journey made of presence, simplicity, and depth. The enlightened one, contrary to what many think, does not become someone who floats above the world, but someone who dives into it with disarming clarity. They do not withdraw from reality, they transcend it without being absent, and their presence, even silent, transforms the environment, because they no longer carry the burdens of the ego, nor are they guided by the fears of the world. They walk as one who knows they are home. The life of the enlightened consciousness is marked by a serene lucidity. The world continues to unfold with its challenges, contrasts, uncertainties, but the enlightened one no longer identifies with the motion. He observes it, participates when necessary, acts with precision, but remains anchored in a silent center. His mind is no longer the master of his being. It has become an instrument. His thoughts come and go, but he doesn't cling. He doesn't fight against what is, doesn't try to change others, doesn't hold on to narratives. He recognizes the impermanence of everything, and it's precisely this acceptance that makes him unshakable. Compassion is one of the most visible expressions of this expanded consciousness. But it's not a sentimental, fragile, or moralistic compassion. It's a compassion that is born from a deep perception of unity. The enlightened one sees the other as part of themselves. They recognize the pain of others as an echo of their own journey, and therefore offers their presence with respect and humility. They don't attempt to save anyone because they understand that each being has their own timing, but they are available, whole, truthful. Their compassion is not just an attitude, it's a frequency, an energy that naturally emanates. Another central aspect is inner freedom. The enlightened one no longer feels imprisoned by time, circumstances, or external opinions. They can be anywhere, with anyone, and still maintain their integrity. They no longer depend on approval, as they have reconciled with who they are. They no longer chase empty goals, as they have found contentment in the now. This freedom is not arrogance, it's spiritual maturity. They do not place themselves above others, but walk alongside. They do not impose their vision, but live as a witness to a greater reality. And this testimony is enough. The everyday life of the enlightened consciousness is imbued with presence. Every gesture, no matter how simple, is performed with totality. When eating, it honors the food. When speaking, it chooses words with precision. When looking, it sees beyond forms. When listening, it hears with the heart. Everything becomes ritual. Everything becomes sacred. Because it recognizes life in everything. It does not separate the spiritual from the material, the divine from the human, the sacred from the profane. It unifies, and this unification dissolves internal conflict. What was once duality is now harmony. This enlightened awareness also manifests in abundant creativity. Free from the shackles of ego, creative energy flows without blockages. The enlightened one creates not for recognition, but because they are in tune with the source of creation. They may paint, write, teach, dance, care, build, all as expressions of being. They do not compete, copy, or compare. Their creation is authentic because it is born from silence, not from neediness. And for this reason, what they generate deeply touches those who receive it, as it carries the vibration of truth. The relationships of the enlightened one also transform. They no longer get involved out of necessity, projection, or neediness, but rather through resonance. They recognize that every encounter is sacred and that each relationship has a purpose. They do not cling, but they also do not run away. They know how to enter and how to leave. They love without possessing, and by loving in this way, they liberate. They do not demand fidelity, for they trust in the flow. They do not require loyalty, for they cultivate presence. Their surrender is total, but without dependence. And this mature love reveals a new way of being with another, lighter, deeper, more truthful. On the inner plane, enlightened consciousness is not made of certainties, but of trust. The enlightened one doesn't need to know everything, as they trust in the unknown. They don't obsessively plan, for they know that life takes care. They don't live in anxiety, for they are in the flow. Their intuition has become their guide, and their listening, their compass. They move with the soul's time, not with the external clock. And this makes them live in peace, even amidst the storm. They don't resist change. They embrace it. And for this reason, they are always transforming, always renewing. The body also becomes a temple of this consciousness, not in the sense of aesthetic worship, but of vibrant reverence. The enlightened one takes care of their body because they recognize it as a vehicle of experience. They feed it with respect, move it with pleasure, listen to it with attention. They know that the body carries memories, wisdom, and keys to healing, and because of this, they do not judge it, exploit it, or deny it. They inhabit it with gratitude, and this conscious inhabitation makes every sensation, every breath, every heartbeat a reminder of the divine presence. Life beyond the veils is not perfect, but it is full. Challenges persist, but they are no longer viewed as enemies. Losses still occur, but they are understood as natural movements. Pain still arises, but it is met with tenderness. Death, once feared, is now seen as part of the cycle. The enlightened one no longer resists life. They dance it, and this dance has no fixed choreography. It's improvisation, it's surrender, it's communion. They live the moment fully, knowing that now is all there is. And this experience aligns them with the pulse of the universe. Over time, their mere presence begins to act as a healing field. Not because they heal, but because their energy cleanses, balances, and awakens. Those who approach feel something inexplicable, a peace, a lightness, a desire to look within. They don't need to teach anything. They evoke. They don't need to convince. They inspire. Their life becomes a silent invitation to truth, and this invitation reaches whoever is ready at the right time. They don't force, don't rush, don't impose. They just are, and in this being, the miracle of transformation occurs. At the core of this consciousness, there is an indestructible certainty. We are one with everything, not as a beautiful idea, but as a living experience. The enlightened one does not talk about unity. They live unity. They perceive that each being is a unique expression of the whole, and that there is no separation between self and other. They see the divine in the stone, in the tear, in the smile, in the shadow. And by seeing the divine in everything, they honor everything. Their life becomes a constant act of reverence, and this reverence transforms the world, not with revolutions, but with presence, because in the end, the true revolution is being conscious. There is a point in the journey where the seeker comprehends, with their whole being, that awakening is not a mystical privilege, but a silent responsibility. Breaking through the three veils, crossing the void, and living in enlightened consciousness does not mean escaping from the world, but embodying a calling. The prophecy of the three veils is not a hidden riddle for the chosen ones. It is a perpetual invitation made to the human soul since the dawn of time. It whispers in the silence between thoughts, in restless nights, in the profound glances we exchange on the street. It calls for those who are no longer satisfied with the shallow, who feel that there is something beyond, even without knowing how to explain what. And the truth is, there has always been a calling, but few have been ready to listen to it until the end. Those who hear the call and follow it to the ultimate consequences become part of an invisible lineage. They are not recognized by titles. They do not carry insignias. They do not stand out for their appearance. Their distinction lies in their vibration. They walk through the world as living temples, bearers of a wisdom that is not taught, but is transmitted through presence. This lineage does not belong to any religion, nation, or culture. It predates all of that. These are the rare awakened ones who, in fulfilling the prophecy, become it. Because now there is no longer any separation between what is known and what is lived. They are the revelation embodied. The fulfilled prophecy does not manifest itself in spectacular events, but in simple gestures laden with truth. When a human being chooses authenticity over convenience, they fulfill the prophecy. When someone silences their mind and listens to their intuition, they answer the call. When a wounded heart chooses to forgive, a veil is dissolved. Each choice aligned with the deep self is a part of the fulfillment. It's not about a final milestone, but about continuity. The prophecy does not end. It updates itself in every moment, in every conscious breath, in every look that sees beyond form. But this awareness is not a burden, it is a sacred privilege. And those who bear it know that they are not here to convince, but to live. They know that their mission is not to convert, but to remind. They are reminders of the light, restorers of silence, catalysts of presence. Wherever they go, they awaken, not through effort, but by vibration. They no longer belong to the current of haste, comparison, competition. They walk in the time of the soul, and therefore they are not in a hurry nor afraid. They know that everything happens exactly as it should, and for this reason, they trust even in chaos. The true mark of these beings is serenity. Even amidst the collapse of the world, they stand firm. Even in the face of the destruction of certainties, they smile, because they see what the eyes do not see. They perceive that every crisis is a birth, that every pain is purification, that every rupture is preparation, and it's in this seeing that they keep the flame lit, even when all around seem asleep. They are like lighthouses in stormy nights. They don't scream, they don't run, they just shine. And this glow, even if ignored by many, silently guides those who are ready to awaken. The final call of the prophecy is not for the many, it is for the few who upon hearing recognize, not because they understand with their mind, but because they feel with their heart. It is a call that transcends time, that surpasses lives, that manifests as a longing for something not yet experienced, but already deeply known. It is like an echo from the origin, a memory of what we have always been before forgetting. And those who feel this call know there is no return. Once heard, it resonates eternally within the being, leading it down paths where logic does not reach. These rare awakened ones do not seek followers, nor do they build temples. They sow presence in the most everyday gestures. They honor truth even in the smallest choices. They know that the new world will not be built with stones, but with vibration, and for this reason, they take care of their frequency as a gardener cares for the soil. They nourish themselves with awareness, speak with precision, breathe with gratitude. Everything they do carries the mark of the sacred, not because they are perfect, but because they are whole. They no longer hide in guilt, nor boast in merit. They simply are. Humanity, though still immersed in noise, already feels the touch of this new vibration. Children are born with ancient eyes. Elders awaken from decades of sleep. Broken hearts discover strength in pain. There is something stirring in the depths, and the rare awakened ones are the guardians of this transition. They do not belong to the old world, but walk within it as bridges. Each one is a portal, and as we pass through them, something within us recalls. A memory awakens, a spark ignites, because they remind us, without words, of who we are before the names, before the wounds, before the veils. And so the prophecy is fulfilled in silence, not as the end of a story, but the beginning of a new cycle, not as the crowning of a hero, but the birth of a collective consciousness. The awakening of humanity will not be marked by external revolutions, but by an internal revolution made of small, conscious choices, of everyday acts filled with soul, of healing gazes. The new era will not come from outside. It is born now, within the heart of each being who chooses, with courage and love, to live without veils. To you, who have made it this far, who have felt each word as a mirror, who have recognized the veils within yourself and chose to cross them, know this: you are a living part of this prophecy. You are the flame that cannot be extinguished. The world may not yet understand you, may still try to silence you, may still wish you to conform, but do not surrender, stand firm, because the truth that resides in you is older than time, stronger than any illusion, more real than anything that can be seen. And your mere presence, awake and whole, is already the miracle that the world awaits. The journey does not end, it transforms. And now, with the veils dissolved, each of your steps is light, each of your gestures is a guide, each of your words is a seed. Continue. Live. Honor what has awakened in you, because you are the call itself, and the time to remember is now. And now, Mind Unfettered. After journeying with me through the 3 veils, I want to invite you to go beyond listening. This is the moment to make your consciousness active in collective manifestation. Tell me here in the comments, which veil do you feel is still present in your life, and what within you has already awakened beyond it? When sharing, you not only connect with other awakened beings in this community, but you anchor this new level of perception within yourself. Your truth, once written, becomes a seed for others to recognize themselves too. Remember, awakening is individual, but liberation is collective, and it's us who co-create this new reality, word by word, choice by choice. And if this video touched your soul, you will feel the call resonate even stronger in the next chapter of the journey. Click now on the video that appears here on your screen. The Book of 33 Steps, the Hidden Map. Jesus left for enlightenment. In it, we will dive into the hidden map left by Yeshua, with each step revealing secrets that history tried to erase, but the soul never forgot. See you there, Mind Unfettered, and remember, you are already the portal.